be looking at L'Hospital method, which is the third method. So let me explain. The third method is talking about differentiation. So let me explain the rules of differentiation. So differentiation says if y equal to ax having power of n, then if we are told to find the difference in y over the difference in x, that's the y over the x, that the power is going to multiply everything. So the power is n, you can see this is the power, then times this dot means multiplication, is going to multiply everything. So we are going to write everything here again. Then after that we are going to subtract minus 1 to the power. So this is what we call differentiation. So let me give you some examples so you understand what I'm saying. If you have y equal to 5x squared plus 4x minus 2. So what we are going to do is that anytime we are having constant, this is a constant, this minus 2 is a constant. Constant means a number. So you can see that all constants, x is not, you will not find any x at the back, or anytime you are having number that you can't find x, something like this at the back, they are called constant. And you can see this constant is minus 2. We are going to do as if we don't see it, we are going to ignore it. So we focus on only this, and we can see that the power of x here is 2, which means the power of x here will be 1, because anytime we can't find it, it means is 1 is there. So what we are going to do, we are going to try to differentiate it. If we are to differentiate, note the rule says the power will multiply first. So when the power multiply, so we are going to write everything back again. Then we subtract minus 1 to the power. So for only this one, so plus this also, we are having 1 will multiply, then 4, then we subtract minus 1 to the power also. So that, remember, constant is gone, is 0. So that the y over the x will equal to, when we multiply, we'll be having 10x, then the power reduced to 1, plus this will give us, when we subtract this, 1 minus 1, that's 0. X is by 0, 1. X is by 0 will always give you 1. So that 1 times 4 times 1, that will still give us 4. So this is how to differentiate. So let's look at the example now under limit. So you can see the question we're having is that we are told to find the limit of x squared minus 8x plus 16 divided by x minus 4. I explained this example in factorization. So we can say we solve it in factorization, and I note that I told you that we can't use direct substitution to solve this question, but we use factorization whereby we factorize. Now what we are going to do, we can see that with the answer we are having is 0. So what we are going to do is that I'm going to try to use L'Hospital method. L'Hospital method, we normally use it for this type of question whereby if we are finding it difficult to factorize, and we know that when we use direct substitution it will not work also. So what we will just do is that we are going to differentiate what we have at the top, and we are going to differentiate what we have at the bottom also. So let's look for solution. So when we try to differentiate what we have at the top, due to what we have here, we can see that the constant here, as in the coefficient here, is 1. So these two will multiply, which is our power, is going to multiply the function, which the function is x squared, then we subtract minus 1 to it, then we have minus the power here is 1. So when 1 multiply the whole function, we have 8x 1 minus 1. Note, constant is gone, this plus 16 is gone because it's a constant. So when we differentiate, that's for the top, this is the top. When we differentiate for the top, we'll be having 2x having power of 1, then minus this will give us 8, because when we try to solve this, we'll be having x having power 0, and that's 1 times 8, 8. 1 times 8 also will give us. So for the top, this is what we have. So for the bottom, the denominator, let's differentiate it also. So here we're having x plus, we're having x minus 4, and we know that this constant is already gone, which means we only focus on this x, and we know that the power of this x is 1. So that will give us, the bottom will just give us the power, will multiply x and we subtract minus 1, so that is going to be giving us 1, because x having power of 0 will still give us 1. This will give us 0, and x having power of 0 will give us 1. 1 times 1 will give us 1. So from the bottom, which means the question is now this. The question is in form of this now, whereby we will be having, what we just do is that we just divide the top divided by the bottom, which the top is what we have here, which is our 2x minus 8 over, then the bottom is 1. We know that due to the question we are told that x approach what? 4. X approach 4, which means x is equal to 4. We know that. So, and what we are going to do is that this is still the same thing as, because when we have 5 over 1 is still the same thing as 5. So this over this is still the same thing as 2x minus 8. So what we are going to do is that we now try to substitute what the value of x is, and that will give us, so that we're having 2 into bracket, what's our x? Our x is 4, then minus 8. So if you look at what we have here, we will say that when this multiply this, we will be having 8 minus 8, and that will still give us 0. So we can say that our answer is still 0, and what we also solve here is also 0. That's using factorization method, we are still having the same answer, 0. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to solve for this using L'Hospital method. We can say that we use factorization to solve this question, and we are having 6. We use direct substitution because we know that it will work. We are still having 6. Now I'm going to show you using the method of L'Hospital method, and we must also have 6 as our final answer. So we are to use L'Hospital method to solve this. We know that these two will multiply. When 2 multiply, is going to give us, when we differentiate this like what I explained, we'll be having 2x, then the power will reduce to 1, then plus this one is having 1. When 1 should multiply 3, we'll be having 3, then the power will reduce, so we'll be having x minus 1. That will give us x having power 0, that's 1. So this will give us 3. When you differentiate this using that differentiation method, this is what you will get. So this, when we differentiate this, we'll be having 1, and this is still the same thing as 2x plus 3. So we know that x approach 2, which means x is equal to 2. So from here, if we try to substitute the value for x, we know 2, then what's x? X is also 2 plus 3. So this will multiply this, we'll be having 4. So that will give us 4 plus 3. So we'll be having 7. So if you look at what we have here, what we solve using the other method, we see that our final answer is 6, but here we are having 7. If our answer is not the same thing with what we solved there, which means what this is trying to tell us is that L'Hospital method only work whereby when we try to solve whereby we can't factorize the question, or when the question is giving us in form of something like this, infinity. That's when we can use it. That's when we can use this method. We can't just use it anyhow. That's what it's trying to tell us, which means this is wrong. We can't use the L'Hospital method for this, because we can factorize this, or we can also use direct substitution to solve it. So direct substitution will work, so we can't use L'Hospital method for this question. So I want to show you something here also. Due to this question, we can see that this question is a straight question, which means we should know that is direct substitution method that we're supposed to use to solve this. So if we use direct substitution, they said x 10 to 2, which means we know that x is equal to 2. That's the meaning. So if we use, let's try to use direct substitution, which means we having 3 into what's x? X is 2. So we have 2 into 3. And that will give us, if we look for 3 raised power 2, we'll be having, that will give us 8. And when we multiply this, we'll be having 24. So which means direct substitution will work for this, which means if I try to use L'Hospital method for this type of question, due to, because the rule says when we can use L'Hospital method is whereby maybe the denominator, the question is form of this, and when we use direct substitution, is giving us, leading to something like this, or when we try to factorize or we can't factorize it and is also giving us something like this, whereby is giving us error. So if this question now is, it will not give, if I use direct substitution, I know that it works. If I try to use L'Hospital method, let's see what's going to happen. So if I try to differentiate this, that's y equal to this, and the y over the x of it, which means 3 will multiply 3, and that will give me 9. So if 3 should multiply 3, is going to give me 9. Then I will be having x, then the power will reduce to 2. So if I now use x equal to 2, if I substitute direct to it now, so let's look at what we have. We'll be having 9 into bracket 2 having power of 2, so that we're having 9 times 4, and you see that this will give us 30, that will give us 36. So this is wrong. The correct answer is this, because direct substitution will work direct. This, we only use L'Hospital method when the denominator, this, when we use, maybe it's giving us a 0, that's when we can use it. So let's look at this example, very, very important. So what I'm going to do is that if I try to use the first method, which is direct substitution, and we know that x tends to 0, which means x is equal to 0, try to look at something. If I change this x, every x that we have here, to 0, we are going to notice that this is also going to be 0, and everything is also going to be 0. So what we are after is that most of the time we don't like our denominator to give us a 0. So I'm going to try to use factorization method. So if you can see that the common factor here is x. So if I factorize the x out, here I'll be left with 3, then here I'll be left with 5x all over this x, and we can see that this will cancel each other. So when this cancel each other, we'll be left with 3 minus 5x. That's what we'll be left with. So from here, this question now, we can now try to use direct substitution. So if I now substitute whereby x is equal to 0, which means anywhere we can find x, we are going to turn it to 0. So 5 will multiply this, so we'll be having 3 minus 0, and that will give us 3. So you can see that for this question now, the answer is 3, due to I try to use direct substitution by, if I substitute 0, this one will give me 0, 0, everything up will give us a 0, the down 2 will give us 0. Once the denominator is giving us a 0, that's problem, which means we can't use that method. Now I use factorization by factorizing this out, and then I cancel this, so you can say our final answer is 3. This is a correct answer. So let's try to use L'Hospital method and see what's going to happen. So to use L'Hospital method, we know that we are going to differentiate the up and the denominator. So we know how to differentiate already. I've explained it. So what we are going to do, I know that this is having power of 1. 1 will multiply 3. That's will give me 3. Then the power will reduce. Once the power reduced to 0, because this we are going to subtract minus 1 to the power, and this will be giving us 0. X is by 0 will still give us 1. So this will give us 1. 1 times 3 will still remain 3. So minus this will give me 2 times 5 will give me 10. Then after that, the power will also reduce to 1. The power will reduce to 1 because x2, if I subtract minus 1 to the power, it will reduce to 1. So for the top one, we are having 10x. So for the denominator, we are having just x. When we differentiate only x, we'll be having 1. So now that we are having 1, so this over this is still the same thing as 3 minus 10x. 3 minus 10x. So if I use the substitution now, that we know that x tend to 0, which means x is equal to 0. So it means anywhere we can find x, we are going to use 0. So we'll be having 3 minus 10 into 0. So we see that 10 multiplied by 0 will still give us 0. So you can see that because when we use the substitution, the denominator will give us 0. So which means L'Hospital method will also work for this question. So we can see that we are having the same theory. So thank you.